Grace and peace. I just jumped on a couple of minutes early because I want to make sure these videos in this TikTok thing is right and exact. Just give me a couple of seconds. I was supposed to be starting at 5 o'clock. Type of one. Do me a favor. Type of one if I'm sounding okay. I'll mute them. Unmute myself. All right, that mute button. I think I have to use that mute button, and I'm gonna try to play a video. Grace and peace, Bradford. Tell the bishop I said happy birthday. I hit him on the Facebook. Abu, Abu, I don't know. You know, it's Christmas gift season. You might have to jump on and straighten out this business. What I don't know what the situation they saying with you and I guess going against sharing something different from Kevin G, and that'll throw me right off the whole topic this afternoon. But with Kevin G and Faithful, I'm gonna hit you in Messenger whilst this video is playing. But I saw something come up on Facebook, and I do remember Dante saying something or alluding to something going along those lines. So we may just have to have you jump on and clear some of this stuff up. It is what it. We can discuss it later if you will stay on. Okay, all right. We're later. Okay, all right, good. All right, maybe I can do that other thing. Did y'all hear about this truck driver? I think they gave him 100. They gave him 110 years. They said he was riding the truck, the brakes were getting hot, and he ran down a hill. There was a ramp. He could have went off to the side, but he smashed the car up. Brother Holt, good to see you, fam. And he smashed the car up. They gave him 110 years with some mandatory minimums, and they couldn't even run them concurrent. Oh, man, all type of stuff. It's crazy out here. But them truck drivers trying to stick together. I'm going to play some stuff. We were supposed to be, we're dealing with the whole thing with Freemasonry and its effect on religion and how it's and how Freemasonry, not just Freemasonry, I'm going to add other secret societies in, but being that Freemasonry is the largest and most popular of the secret societies that deal with the occult tradition and different things, I want to show people the effects of it on the government, so I'm gonna go through some pictures, and we're gonna deal with that stuff, Scottish Rite and who was Albert Pike and all these other people. We'll have some objections because a lot of people in Freemasonry will say, well, there's no one man that speaks for the doctrine. But the 3 or 4 Freemasons that I'm gonna bring up, they all have received. Remember now, I told y'all before, it's like high school. Once you get out of high school, you could be involved in appendant bodies. That's like going to college. Scottish Rite is college. You can gain further light. You can further your Masonic education. York Rite is the same thing. Then you got other groups. You got Tribe and Mystic Shrine and all of that other stuff. But you have to have graduated. You have to offer all of those things. You must be a Master Mason. You must have been through the 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge. And we said the Blue Lodge, once you're a master, you're a master. And these other things are opened up for you so you can go and you can get further light. And I'm going to explain why I'm sharing all of this, because a lot of people would argue there's no one authority. So if we see Lucifer, if we see other things that Hall or Coyle or Mackey or anybody else say, some people wouldn't want to argue, well, that don't speak for everybody in Freemasonry. That don't speak for the Blue Lodge, so I'm not going to lump everybody together. I'm going to make sure I take my time and work through it. I'll talk about the Taxel hoax. That's how today I'm dealing more with Freemasonry and the conscious community and Gnosticism and how Ben and all of those other cats were influenced all the way down to Kevin Wesley Young, Pseudo, or everybody has been influenced by occult tradition for other guys that were squares, that were Freemasons involved in the esoteric. And we're gonna take our time and we're gonna walk through that. Before I do, I said I wanted to mention that truck driving. I want to play 2 other videos, 2 little short TikToks. I want to play these, and we have to. It's a different time. We're living in a time of information. So even in your sharing, Some people would say it's by the Spirit of God, and I agree with that, but it's becoming more difficult to witness. Oh man, shoot. Some people say it's just hard out here to be a believer. Once you walk in the barbershop, you walk anywhere and you start talking about you Christian, it's gonna be that 1, 2, 3 family members or a friend or somebody, baby daddy at the cookout, and he want to drop the knowledge that he received from behind the wall. He want to drop the knowledge that he received from the internet. Because a lot of this stuff was going on in the conscious community back in the days, and a lot of things were squashed. People had clarity on a lot of stuff, a lot of things. But with the internet, it has revived old stuff. So old stuff that we dealt with long time ago is revived. And Dan Brown ain't help us. These Nicene Council conspiracies, nobody dealing with a primary source. And we're going to show how people push that, and the role that the internet is playing with that right now. Oh, it's a problem. So we're going to be able to, we need to be able to articulate our beliefs and let people know, listen, this is where that comes from. Yeah, we could talk about that too. And this is what many of us call pre-evangelism. Before you can even talk about I'm a believer and want to crack the Bible open, there's a lot of people that tell you, man, listen, that Bible was made up. Osiris was born of a virgin. Krishna was born of a virgin. But before I get in all of that and I pull this stuff up, I wanted to just explain that right there and let y'all know that in Freemasonry, like Scottish Rite, they got the 32 degrees, and that 33rd degree is an honorary degree. They usually give that out for people that have put in work. And that's very important, because I want you to know that these guys that I'm quoting, they are like Morals and Dogma. That was recommended read until 1974, 64, 74, something like that. I'm gonna pull it up. I got it in my notes here. In the Scottish Rite. So we can't run around here and start acting crazy. These Freemasons can't run around here and acting crazy. We getting this from yo people now. That's what the best thing to do is use these folk people. We getting this from yo people. Don't worry, I'm gonna talk about taxable hoax. I'm gonna talk about how the church lied. How the Catholic Church was at war with them. We'll talk about that too. But at the same time, I gotta be slow when I'm dealing with certain things, because questions, I have to be honest, Yolanda. Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, they pulled out. Them dudes started the church down there in Philadelphia, and then turned around, and they Prince Hall brothers came in and they started the first black church. From the gate, the church opened up, and they started having Masonics. They started holding large meetings inside Mother. What's that Mother? What they call that church down there? I got it up on video. Mother Bethel. Oh, we got to explain that. Well, Christianity is the biggest religion in the country, so of course, and Freemasonry is a type of religion. So we'll explain the connection. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a few sessions, but we're going to walk through it nice and slow. We're going to walk through it nice and slow, but it's important that we deal with this conscious community thing. Before I jump to that, I said a lot, so I can just jump into the video and show you who's who. I'm gonna do a good bit of reading. I'm gonna show y'all a couple of videos, but I want to play some stuff first. We got to get right. Somebody said, I'll be Israel. I said, I'll be Israel. All right, that might be some second thing. What's good, Wiggins? Somebody, that might be something different. And I got to show y'all the other brother. I got to show y'all that other brother with that occultic restart people. That's a whole nother video. Matter of fact, I might pull that one up right here. But look at this. I want to show y'all something. And this is just what you got to deal with out here. So you just can't say, oh, that's the devil. It's the devil. I just believe. Let me see what this is saying.
One of the most disconcerting things about being raised in white academia is that you genuinely believe that you are well educated, and then you have to go and read other history that you weren't taught, and slowly your education kind of crumbles down. And so
type of one if you can hear that without an echo.
More patient and compassionate towards people, because I didn't realize a lot of this stuff either. But I wanted to read to you a little bit from this book. Is called What They Never Told You in History Class by Indus Kamit Kush. And he writes, in the book of Revelation, it reads, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on that throne, and he who sat there appeared like jasper and carnelian. Both of these are rare stones that are very, very dark. So the person sitting on the throne was very, very dark. They left that out, didn't they, with their Renaissance white Jesus? The Hebrews were a dark-skinned people. His feet were like burned brass. Well, I'm white. I don't have burned brass colored feet. That's from Revelation. His hair was like wool. Um, what race of people's hair texture can be best described as wool? That's from Revelation. My skin is black. That's from Job. Jeremiah writes, they are black. Solomon writes, look not upon me because I am black. Josephius, the Jewish historian, wrote, Christ was a man of simple appearance,
Josephus, she
mature
means.
age, and dark skin with very little hair. And in the book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors, Kersey Graves says, in pictures and portraits of Christ by the early Christians, he is uniformly represented as being black. He has the same tightly curled hair as that of the early Buddhas. What did the early Buddhas look like? Here's Buddha. What kind of hair is that? So one of the most disconcerting things about being raised in white academia is that you genuinely believe
I'm gonna
that
play it
you're
one more
educated,
time.
and then you have to go and like read other history that you weren't taught, and slowly your education kind of crumbles down. And so I've realized I need to be a little bit more patient and compassionate towards people because I didn't realize a lot of this stuff either. But I wanted to read to you a little bit from this book is called What They Never Told You in History Class by Indus Comet Kush. And he writes, in the book of Revelation, it reads, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on that throne, and he who sat there appeared like jasper and carnelian. Both of these are rare stones that are very, very dark. So the person sitting on the throne was very, very dark. They left that out, didn't they, with their Renaissance white Jesus? The Hebrews were a dark-skinned people. His feet were like burned brass. Well, I'm white. I don't have burned brass colored feet. That's from Revelation. His hair was like wool. What race of people's hair texture can be best described as wool? That's from Revelation. My skin is black. That's from Job. Jeremiah writes, they are black. Solomon writes, look not upon me because I am black. Josephius, the Jewish historian, wrote, Christ was a man of simple appearance, mature age, and dark skin with very little hair. And in the book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors, Kersey Graves says, in pictures and portraits of Christ by the early Christians, he is uniformly represented as being black.
All right, I want to stop right there. She's talking about, you see that she mentioned Kersey Graves. A few people are going to mention Kersey Graves, and we're going to get into who Kersey Graves was. But I'm going to, this is just part of what's going on out here right now. You see this now. She don't look. I'm gonna play something else. In fact, I might hold on with this other video because that might be too much for y'all right now. She don't look black. So now we got people promoting ideas. Let's just put this out there and quoting people as authority like Kersey Graves. I'm going to show y'all how echo chambers come about. We're gonna look into some things. Matter of fact, let me give y'all the other video before. Should I give y'all that other video first? Because there's things we got to look at. We got to make sure we're working our way through this thing with an honest and open mind, with a discerning spirit. Let me play this one so I can close this screen up so I can open the other ones up, and I'm gonna get something to drink because I got a good little bit of reading to do here. I gotta be like them other guys. I gotta get me a reader here. Now wait a minute.
The 10 northern tribes of the northern Israelite kingdom and takes these tribes into galut, into exile. We do not know where they are to this very day, and we're looking at each other. Oh my God. We had to bring underwear to Shmulik's house on Saturday night to get a Bible lesson about the tribes of Israel from 2,700 years ago. He's gone on one too many missions. He's lost touch with reality. And then he says, we've discovered the tribe of Dan. And he thinks, what? You heard me correctly. We've discovered the tribe of Dan, the tribe of Dan. The biblical tribe of Dan that was taken away in the year 721 BCE by the Assyrian king, taken, according to legends, to a place called beyond the mountains, to Bikat Hayarech, the Valley of the Moon. Where is this place? No one knows. And he starts telling us this incredible story, how a group of Jewish anthropologists and sociologists have been, for the last 17 years, carefully studying an isolated tribe in the Gondar region, the existence of which has been known for decades, but never been thoroughly researched. And this group of individuals, they're living an archaic form of Jewish life that hasn't been seen for over 2,500 years. You would probably call it the Judaism of the First Temple period. In other words, they knew about the prophets of Israel. They knew about the judges of Israel. They knew about the kings of Israel. They knew Saul, our first king, and they knew David, our second, and they knew Solomon the third, and they knew that Solomon was the one who on Mount Moriah had constructed some 2,900 years ago the first temple. They didn't call it the first temple because they didn't know there had been a second. They called it Solomon's temple. And there were a few other minor things that they never heard about. They knew almost nothing about synagogues because they knew about the temple in Jerusalem. And they knew nothing about rabbis because they knew about the Kohanim, the priests that served in the temple. And they knew very little about prayer because they were very much into sacrifice. They knew about the sacrifice at the time of the first temple. They knew nothing about Tzfat and Jewish mysticism and nothing about the expulsion of Spanish Jewry in 1492. They knew nothing about King Herod and the Second Temple. They knew nothing about Herzl or about Zionism or about Hitler or about the Holocaust, and they've never heard of the State of Israel. As a matter of fact, they didn't even know there was such a thing as Jews with white skin. 2,700 years ago, the king of Assyria.
All right, I'm gonna park right there. I shouldn't even play that one right there. I shouldn't even play that one right there. Now look at what my sister say. She said promoting nonsense does not help the cause. White people, please stop helping us. Why would she say that? Why would you say that, LeChat? Let me see what my other sisters say about the second video. But do they know Jesus? We'll talk about identity and this war that's going on because there's people that's pushing some stuff. There's people trying to force the hand of some things, and we'll get to that. But back to the regularly scheduled program. And I played that for a reason. Remind me later on. We'll get into identity, who you are, the divine you, the chosen you, and how this is nothing really new. But there's some things you believers got to deal with. We got to deal with some stuff. I like I said, I like what my sister said right here, but do they know Jesus? Because a lot of people can get so caught up into certain things, the divine them. Jesus, when that narcissism, I'm getting ahead of myself. I ain't even getting to that. Let me go on with this thing right now. Now, this is we getting into it right now. So you heard the girl pushed a scholar named Kersey Graves. You heard the girl push a scholar named Kersey Graves. I'm gonna play this right now. Fair use. Let me make sure this thing is being. I just want to make sure this screen is all right.
But books that changed my life. One book is called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors. I read this book when I was around 16 or 17. I read this book. I think I was 16 years old. I was doing a lot of research and study and knowledge, and this was before YouTube really got big. I think this may have been before YouTube even existed. YouTube was initiated in 2006, and I was 16 in 2006, so you guys can calculate how old I am. But during that time period, it wasn't as much abundant information out there. I had to go to the library and study. And I had a few social media sites where I would go to, which is MySpace existed at that time. And I would just vibrate with people in the community out in Leimert Park and study with my pops would take me to, you know, conscious bookstores. It started off at, you know, Walden Books, children's bookstores, libraries, Hooked on Phonics, the foundation. Graduated to Barnes and Nobles, graduated to the conscious bookstores, and eventually I graduated to university libraries, Library of Congress, doing things like that. So it's all in gradations, it's all in levels. This book was phenomenal because I was raised in a Christian household, and a lot of Western societies is still in Christianity. I have nothing against any particular religion. The thing is that religion is just a tool. It's supposed to lead you to the divine, but when you have corrupt religion or false religion, it doesn't teach you about yourself or about spirituality. So that's when I began seeking knowledge about myself and spirituality.
All right, I'm gonna stop that right there. He brought up 16 Crucified Saviors, and that's a book that's popular in the penitentiary. That's a book that's popular in conscious bookstores. I want to give a warning. Because when we say conscious bookstores, there's certain stores that they're pushing an agenda. They want to push information. They want to push certain things. The first thing I'm going to ask y'all is, what do we look for when we're, I just don't pick up a book and read it. Because if he go on, he'll say, well, Percy, I don't know if that's a girl. I don't know if that's a guy. He just read 16 Crucified Saviors. And for the y'all that don't know, this is written by a guy named Percy Graves, and he said Krishna and the Jesus story and the Heru story is all the same stories. As a matter of fact, all over the world, there were crucified saviors all over the world. And that's a book that's pushed heavily in conscious bookstores. You got to be careful with conscious bookstores, because conscious bookstores are one of the main stores that have a lot of occult material, Gnostic material, African spirituality, all type of different. I'm gonna say African because they push, you know, they push blackness, anything black. But in the midst of that, we have Santeria in there. They say this is original and this is African. How to call on the spirits, how to call on your ancestors, understanding Freemasonry. Most of the books that I bought from on Freemasonry come from the conscious bookstore in Brooklyn. And it's crazy. I went there one day to get some stuff, John Henry Clark and some Masonic stuff. I see a limousine outside. I go inside T.D. Jakes in the conscious bookstore. But he was signing books, you know, they were selling some of his stuff because he's popular. But I warn people, some people, especially when they're getting into the culture thing as a believer and you want to get into your culture, you can open yourself up to spirits going in the conscious bookstore. They burning some stuff over there. They got lectures in there. I go in there, I'm building with the dread in them, but they want some heavy other stuff. I said, well, so I told the girl, I said, well, I'm a pastor. She said, well, read this. She don't know. I just came home a year ago. She don't know I got all of that stuff right there. But then she started leading me and pointing me out to books. And she don't know I read a lot of those and I'm here for something else. But there's people in there that want to wake you up. They want to wake, quote unquote, because you got to be careful when these folk waking you up and waking in and woke and higher knowledge and all this other stuff. You got to be real careful because it's dangerous, because it's spiritual. This thing is spiritual. There's a natural side to it, but don't get it twisted for one moment. It's spiritual, and the enemy knows how to tailor some stuff for individuals. He know what Eve wanted. He know what Eve, he just know he's been doing this for millennium on end. He's been doing this for a long time. So I tell people, be careful when you're going into these quote unquote conscious bookstores, because there's a lot of antichrist material in there. And basically the whole story is about that. Couple of things in there from what's that, Reverend Barshango back in the days, holy days, holidays, a couple of Christian Jawanza Conjufa, a couple of Christian books were in there that were talking about blackness and warring against the European image of Jesus. But then they'll say, well, and they'll give you continued readings, and they'll give you recommended readings. And then they'll start hitting you. Did you know there were more than one Christ? The Bible isn't about no man. You ain't supposed to worship no white man. What you're supposed to do is understand that you're God. waking up the Christ in you. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to show you some other stuff now. Now we're going to get into a little bit of Kersey Graves. I'm going to have to do some reading because I want people to know who this guy is. Anytime I'm going to get a book, I just don't read what the book is about. I would go to the back of the book and I would see about the author. Are they a professional in their field? Is this what they do? Now, if I'm a believer, do they have an alternate spirituality to feed me? What is this an atheist that's teaching this? And sometimes I'd rather read it from an atheist. Is this a Muslim? If it's a Muslim, I know what he ultimately, even if he don't never quote no Quran, I know what he's trying to imply. I know what he's trying to do throughout that book. Now, can I say a Muslim can't write good history that I can read? Something on Christianity that I can read? Yeah, but I'm going to be more cautious if a Muslim is writing something on the history of Christianity because I know what their agenda, I know what their beliefs are concerning Christianity and Jesus becoming the Son of God and what Muhammad and what Quran say about that as opposed to the Bible. Now, somebody that don't know any better, they'll get caught up into this stuff because of brothers doing certain things. All right, before I get into, I want to read this right here. Hopefully y'all can, matter of fact, yeah, let me look down at my phone. We're dealing with Kersey Graves. Kersey Graves, born in November, was a skeptic, atheist, a spiritualist. That's going to catch me right there. A spiritualist, reformist, and writer. And why is a spiritualist important? When you hear spiritualists, a lot of these people commune with the spirits. They believe in the spiritual realm. They commune with spirits, and we'll get into what their doctrine actually is. Kersey Graves was born in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, in November. His parents were Quakers. And as a young man, he followed them in their observance and then later moved to Hicksite wing of Quakerism. Graves was largely self-educated and at the age of 19, teaching in a school in Richmond, a career he followed for more than 20 years. He was an advocate of abolitionism, was also interested in language reform and became involved in a number of radical free thinkers within Quakerism. In 1844, he joined a group of about 50 utopian settlers in Wayne County, Indiana. In the same month, he was disowned by his Quaker meeting group due to his neglect of attendance. You know, people coming to new spirituality, they stop going to church or their congregation to go where they got this higher truth, where they preaching this black, this, that, they teaching the real truth, they exposing these holidays and all of that stuff. And this is how come I said we got to be fair with this thing, because information is out here. But how do we work through the pseudo, what's a lie, who's pushing agenda, and what's the truth? Because all of this is on the internet. The group he was associated with dabbled in mesmerism and spiritism. Now, y'all remember I had to pull up that whole mesmerism thing with this animal magnetism. And then we're going to get into the secret and law of attraction. You know, all of that stuff y'all like. You know, all of that stuff y'all dabble in. Then I'll touch on how people connect the UFOs and that often opens door to the occults and spirit and listening to voices. When believers get obsessed with this is in the Bible. I seen a UFO when I was little. I'd be looking up in the sky and doing all of this stuff. We're going to explain the dangers of that. The enemy is subtle, seducing spirits and doctrines of devil. It's different from rape. This is seduction that takes place over a period of time. In July, all right, this is when he get married. All right, criticisms. This is criticism on his work. Now, one, he was not a scholar trained in the field. He was a spiritualist, but he was into the Bible. He read the Bible a lot. His scholarship was, however, quickly criticized. Remember, the main book that he wrote, the most popular book in the conscious community in the penitentiary on YouTube right now, was World's 16 Crucified Saviors. This guy told y'all that Krishna and Mithra and Osiris was born of virgins. They had 12 disciples. They walked on water. And they healed some guy that had 2 sisters from the dead. And the Bible is all a copycat of ancient stories. Where'd that come from? Who invented that one? Are there primary sources for all of these stories? We're going to look into that. was quickly criticized by Reverend John Taylor Perry of Cincinnati. He showed that all sources Grave used were free thought texts. And this is going to bring us to that echo chamber, how echo chambers are formed. I hear one person saying something, we start sharing that among each other, and then later on it spills out to the group. But when we're quoting each other, boy, y'all don't know, and this guy quoting Dr. Ben, and Dr. Ben quoting John G. Jackson, and John G. Jackson quoting Alva Van Sertima, all of them quoting Church Wall, Freemasons quoting Count Vonley, quoting Cursed Graves, all occultists. Now we're talking about Freemasonry, which has been the school of the occult. The occult is just esoteric teachings from all over. Sufism, Gnosticism is in Freemasonry. Oh, don't get it. Mysticism is in Freemasonry. Don't get it twisted. Oh, it's mixed up with the Bible, but this is what they call that thing down south, gumbo. This is a mixture right here. When we talk about Freemasonry, then we'll move on. Is it compatible for the believer? Then we'll move on to that. Free thought text, which in turn had synthesized random, his misunderstood and half-diagnosed pieces of misinformation. Graves constructed from this a theory that religion was concocted by priests and made up of superstition and myth. This belief was consistent with the movement in Royal Arch Freemasonry, then to revive Gnosticism as a challenge to the church, to church teachings. Royal Arch Freemasonry, then to revive Gnosticism. Somebody's been pushing y'all are gods. This Christ is a God inside of you. It's a divine spark to wake up. That's like when we ask people. Anytime people say they love him and they start talking about other stuff, and they talk less about him and who he is and more about them and their divine self, and we the original man, we built the pyramids, the UFOs coming back for us. You got to understand, we got the true knowledge of the Bible. When people start talking about that and start putting Jesus down and lifting up self, lifting up God, lifting up I can manifest, you got to speak it into existence. It's all dangerous grounds. Oh, it's all dangerous grounds. I got a lot to read. Now, a lot of people in the conscious community would turn around and will be quoting all of this stuff. Oh, you Christian, you dumb Christians don't know the higher knowledge of the Bible. The Bible is made up. Now, I'm going to take y'all to some historians. We got to remember there's some things we got to look for. What is this person's belief system? Because every scholar, everybody's pushing something. That's how come I'm going to give y'all some medicine from atheists. See what the atheists have to say, because they're running around here telling us Jesus never existed. They'll jump in the room, do your research. Constantine invented Christianity, and they don't even know what a primary source is. They don't even know the sources, what source we're going to use for Nicaea. So we got to go to that. We got to go. Are there any sources for Jesus? Or did Freemasons from France invent this to push a doctrine? That's all I'm asking. Did Freemasons form the conscious community? Did European mystics in the 18th and 17th century, did they form what Sonnet and them doing today? I'm just asking. Was Albert Churchward a Freemason? Was Gerald Massey a Druid? Did Gerald Massey's wife, according to Dr. Finch, did Gerald Massey's wife have seances in the crib? I'm gonna pull up a whole bunch of videos today. We're gonna take a time and talk. Of course, there's a lot of people got a lot of knowledge out here, but they don't. It seems like the simple things they don't understand. That's how come I'm scared of you Bible thumpers when y'all don't want to go to the scholars. I'm scared of you Bible thumpers when y'all don't want to go to no history. Of course, why is it a problem? Because it's easier to get involved in make-believe. What I feel, that resonate with me that I'm the chosen. Wait a minute. Let's just see what 1 or 2 or 3 anthropologists got to say. Ain't nobody going to hell for reading what the anthropologists got to say. These folks got a whole Hebrew roots movement over here. These folks got a whole doctrine. They got whole Hebrew roots Bible. Oh, the Greek language is really no good. Your mind that's the lie that's in Christianity. It has become Greek. What all the manuscripts say? Pump your brakes, brother, but they pushing the line. This lies being spread. Oh, this lie is being spread. We're gonna talk, we're gonna take our time and we're gonna talk good. Let's see what Richard Carrier has to say with a bachelor's and a PhD, a historian, trained atheist that hate the Bible. Let's see what he say about 16 crucified saviors and Osiris. He bangs out against Chris. So matter of fact, I can't even say he ain't got a dog in the fight. He got a dog in the fight. He's against Christianity, but he's on infidel radio telling them folk, yo, we looking like clowns out here using Kersey Graves. Yet the whole internet running around with Kersey Graves, even if they don't know his name, all of them running around, folk done built whole channels off of Kersey Graves. And this is what I'm talking about when we start dealing with certain things like that echo chamber effect. Y'all know who Reverend Ray Hagan is? Kersey Graves. Y'all know who Walter Williams is? Historical origins of the church. Who look in the book and listen to him? Kersey Graves. So Kevin Wesley Kersey Graves, young pseudo Kersey Graves, Reverend Ray Hagan Kersey Graves, whole congregation, what's the other guy? Walter Williams Kersey Graves. It's a whole bunch of Dr. Ben Kersey Graves. It's a whole bunch of folk that's quoting Kersey Graves, and Dr. Ben and them get to quoting each other. After Kersey Graves wrote his book on 16 crucified saviors, John G. Jackson basically wrote the whole book Christianity Before Christ. Some will argue this plagiarized because everything he's saying in the book is what Kersey Graves said. Then Van Sertima and them pick it up. Then everybody else pick it up and they start running with it. Then you hear, what's the other guy from the Rock Newman show? The bald head brother. Oh, man. Name the other brother from the Rock Newman show, stay banging on Sinette and them, stay banging on Christianity. And you hear all of these guys all repeating them. It's all known history. And all of them can trace their sources back to Kersey Graves. But before we go to Kersey Graves, I'm going to take y'all one back. I'm going to take y'all further. I'm going to take y'all to the French occultists. I'm going to take y'all to some French folk. Benjamin Franklin mans and them. We're going to take y'all back, and I'm going to bring up Bart Ehrman, another atheist, another one with a degree in the field. Y'all can ask him about that Aramaic too. That's what he do. Y'all had Divine Prospect. He was on here not too long ago. He talked about them Christian textual critics. I'm going to bring all three of them up. We're going to see what Habermas and them got to say. With the resurrection, we're going to see what these folk got to say. What's the other brother from Dallas with the Center New Testament research dealing with all the manuscripts all over the world? We're going to bring them all up. Degrees in the field. Oh, I like scholarship. I ain't just going what I feel, because I feel up today, I feel down tomorrow. Feel chosen today, I don't feel chosen tomorrow. I feel chosen a week from now. So I don't just go with feelings, what resonate. I don't just go with all of that stuff right there. Is there anything to back up what I'm saying? That's fair. That ain't fair. That's fair right there. Is there anything to back up what I'm saying? So let's see what Richard Carrier got to say, PhD. Let's see what he got to say, atheist, bang on the Bible. Let's see what he got to say about this Osiris nonsense, this Mithra nonsense. And then I ask people, go to India, talk to anybody from India. Was Krishna born of a virgin? Y'all ain't called no universities. No, y'all didn't. Not these folk running around here telling me. Let's see what he got to say. Now, Carrier, like I said, Carrier's an atheist. Let's see what the atheist got to say. Richard Carrier, Kersey Graves and World's 16 Crucified Saviors. Richard Carrier wrote this. Richard Carrier, right? World's 16 Crucified Savior, or Christianity Before Christ, and that's the other book that Jackson wrote, is unreliable. Y'all see that word right there? But no comprehensive critique exists. Most scholars immediately recognize many of his findings as unsupported and dismiss Graves as useless. This is an atheist, historian, PhD. This is what he do for a living, and he's been doing this. After all, a scholar who really cites a source, look at the back of his book. These guys, they just pick something up and read it because they're intimate. They want to believe that. They want to believe Jesus didn't exist. They want to believe this stuff. But I'm going to take y'all, and the thing that hurts me, they pushing black power, and white folk gave them this medicine. And I know color ain't got nothing to do with it, but it's just ironic to me. That's all I'm saying. After a scholar who really cites a source isn't useful to have as a reference even when he's right. For example, a specific problem, however, and here's a Jesus. Oh, who else? Let me y'all know who a Chariot S is, right? A Chariot S and all them people is pushing that Christmas time. Jesus is a myth. What's the other the movies, the guys? Peter, what's the guy name? Put the guy name down here that wrote that did that other thing. Peter, Joseph, and all of them. We got to talk about all of that. And it's crazy how the other girl, she died on Christmas. How many years Cherry has been dead now? And some generally poor, but not always incorrect Christian rebuttals. He's talking about that. A very helpful discussion of related methodological problems by renowned scholar Bruce Metzger. Who Bruce Metzger is? Where he come from? That Greek text y'all reading? He the one that trained Bart Ehrman. These folks scholars in the field. Matter of fact, get some of Bruce Metzger material. Get some of Bruce Metzger material and come back to me with an Aramaic text. These are professionals in the field. I like to read. I like to at least know what they got to say. Bruce Metzger is also well worth reading. An atheist is telling you that Bruce Metzger is well worth reading. Methodology in the study of the mystery religions and early Christianity. Because we had a lot of Freemasons that wanted to push a doctrine. What they turn around and do, they turn around and say, oh, the early Christianity wasn't this. This was the early Christianity. What the early Christianity were really mystics. The early Christianity, may not say these words. The early Christianity were really Freemasons. They really dealt with signs and symbols. They didn't think about a real physical resurrection. They didn't really go to church. They weren't worshiping no man. The worshiping of a man named Jesus didn't come on the scene until Constantine. In general, even when the evidence is real, it often only appears many years after Christianity began. There were other resurrection stories. Let me bring up Gary Habermas. There were other resurrection stories. Let's see what the atheists say. Then we're going to go with the Gary Habermas got to say. Of course, there were resurrection stories. But when we go pick up them primary sources, they come 120 years after people were already saying Christ rose. So it looks like somebody else stole from somebody, but these folk flipping it around because they don't expect you to look. I did my research. Okay, I know. You ain't even read 16 Crucified. That's above your head, you dumb Christians. You dumb Bible believers. Let me keep going. After Christianity began, and thus might be evidence of diffusion in the other. Let me make this big right here. Evidence of diffusion in the other direction. What do we got here? And this is coming from an atheist. That bear witness, he don't like that Bible. He don't like Christianity. Christianity can't help us down here. This coming from an atheist with a PhD. Let me keep reading. What else is going on here? Another typical problem is that Grave draws too far or far too much from what often amounts to rather vague evidence. In general, there are 10 kinds of problem that crop up in Grave's work. Here are some of them. Grave often does not distinguish his opinion and theories from what his sources and evidence say. If you mixing what you say up with the scholars and making it sound like your words and your words are their words and all of that stuff, that's make-believe nonsense. Grave often omit important sources and evidence. Graves often mistreat in a biased or anachronistic way the sources he do use. Graves occasionally rely on suspect sources when he do, because if you look at his book, he ain't really even got sources like that in there. And we got the same spirit that has passed down when we look at the writings of Harper, when we look at the writings of Acharia S. Let me bring up Bart Ehrman's book, Did Jesus Really Exist? Because them conscious folk try to drag him into this, and he had to write a whole book. He said, I don't believe none of that nonsense. He said, y'all believe in the little circles that y'all live in. Y'all believe that stuff. And that's because, once again, because of the echo chamber effect. Graves' work is totally uninformed by modern social history, a field that did not begin to be formally pursued until after World War III. After Graves died, Graves' conclusions and theories are often exceed what the evidence justify, and he treats both speculation and sound theories with equal value. Graves often ignores important questions of chronology and the actual order of plausible history influence and completely disregards the methodological problems this creates. Graves' work lacks all humility, which is, what is this thing saying? Which is considerably, I can't pronounce stuff, given the great uncertainties that surround the sketchy material he had to work with. Graves' listen to this, Graves' scholarship is obsolete, having been vastly improved upon new methods. That's what scholarship is: growing, learning, new discoveries. When people start talking about Bibles and manuscripts, we're constantly finding stuff. We're constantly learning stuff about the language and the people and the culture, so we can update our understanding and we build upon it. That's what scholarship do. Build upon some past good teachings, not garbage. Good teachings. Discoveries and textual criticism in the century since he worked. In fact, almost every historical work written before 1950. Look at the age on the sources a lot of these conscious woke dudes use. A lot of folk out here, you got to understand, I got a source from the 1800s. So what? So what that mean? You got a source from the 1800s. You know how much stuff has changed? I got to go over what you out here publishing. I got to go over what you out here teaching, because so much has changed, so much belief, science, understanding, anthropology, our knowledge of language have changed since 1950. That's all we saying. That's all we saying. We don't want to swallow. Because you got blind faith. You don't want to believe the truth. No. No, you the one with the blind faith. You just accepting anything. And I just don't move like that. Bunch of us just don't move like that. And this is what it is. It's regarded, listen, let me read this one more again. In fact, almost every historical work written before 1950 is regarded as outdated and untrustworthy by historians today. Once again, this is a trained historian, a master's and a PhD in world history. We got to keep stressing that. I know. Yeah, scholarship don't mean, I know that, but it's good to at least know. You got to have a surgery. You go ahead and let them cut your foot off in the emergency room. I want a second opinion. Let me go to some specialists to deal with this disease. Let me just, and no doctor worth his salt would ever tell you for you seeking a second opinion is wrong. But yet these fools out here want to tell me anything. These fools out here want to say anything to me. Let me stop this. And fair use, I want to stop that, and I want to pull something else up. And let me pull up another PhD, another historian, person that deal Bible scholar. You know, people that deal with scholarships, they steeped in the history, they at least certain parts of the history. This is how come we can quote, even though he's an atheist, this is why we can quote Bart Ehrman, because he's a New Testament scholar. He got a good idea what was going on in the first century. He got a good idea what manuscripts were floating around. He got a good idea how many manuscripts are out here today that people are going over. He got a good idea about these translations. This is what he do. Now I'll go to somebody else. Now, what's the other guy name? Mike Heiser. We'll go with Heiser dealing with the Old Testament. I'm not saying that Bart don't know nothing, but New Testament textual, that's his specialty. That Greek, that's his specialty. So I want to go to just see what the specialists have to say. Somebody, you get that new BMW. Somebody could wrap it. Somebody could wrap it for $500. But it ain't gonna look like them dudes that's gonna wrap it for $5,000. This is just what it is. You getting what you pay for. The research, I've done my research. What research these dudes did? Please tell me what research they did. And that other brother, like I said, he didn't even know if Kersey Graves was a man or a lady. Tell me about this guy. Tell me about his background. Did he get molested? Did he get beat up in the church? What made him walk away and start talking this way? He found the real truth, or there's some other hurts, there's some other things that he's dealing with, because every scholar got some type of agenda. Some type of bias, should I say. Googleology, that's what it is. Let me play this thing right here. Fair use. We just want to see what the scholars got to say. Ain't nobody gonna be mad, but we just want to see what the scholars got to say.
What is, in your mind, the fastest way to disarm a mythicist?
I've got a book called Historical Jesus where I list 12.5 texts, many of them outside the New Testament, in the ancient world for the existence of Jesus. But one probably better example I would use, some say, yeah, but you're a Christian. Okay, Bart Ehrman, an atheist New Testament scholar. Bart Ehrman gives 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus within 100 years. Now, 100 years is actually kind of strict, but it's a nice, narrow parameter for saying Jesus lived. 100.
And at the same time, when we start saying stuff like this, how many, because I'm saying Dr. Ben Folk, I don't call him Alexander the Great. I call him Alexander the Greek. How many sources we got from Alexander the Great, and how many, the Greek, as they would call him, and how later are those sources? What about the Greek philosophers, and how later are those sources? Because there's people that y'all clearly talk about. There's people they clearly talk about in the conscious bookstore, on the conscious channels, that they don't even doubt existed. Go see how long the sources are from the time that they lived when we hear about certain things. That's fair. And then we weigh them out. And then when we say we weigh them out, it ain't about faith. If we're dealing with people coming out of antiquity, Jesus, especially for being a rabbi, not being a king, not being somebody like Alexander the Great, not being a pharaoh, to have sources about him, this is listen, this is, you got to weigh it out, brother. You talking crazy. A lot of folk out here talking crazy and reckless to us, and we don't receive it because it's nonsense. They don't even know they talking nonsense. What's the other guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson? He said that. He said that the crazy thing is there's some people that you smart enough to be dangerous. You know a little something, but you don't know enough to know you don't even know, if that makes sense.
100, and here's an atheist, 100 years time, 15 different sources evidencing Jesus' death. If he died, he had to have lived. So Bart Ehrman calls that one of the two best evidences we have for that Jesus lived in history. The other one is that Paul is the best New Testament reference we have. Paul, critics talk about half of Paul's epistles, 7 out of 13, being accredited, and you can use them in arguing because they're great sources. Well, the best thing Paul gives us is that he was an eyewitness to the eyewitnesses. Paul in Galatians 1 and again in Galatians 2, he went to Jerusalem and got to know Peter, James, the brother of Jesus, then in Galatians 2, John. They're all together, and the topic they're discussing, as Paul tells us, is the nature of the gospel, to make sure they're all on the same page. And Paul concludes, yes, they're all on the same page. But here, that's two great sets of data for the existence of Jesus. 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus, and Paul knowing himself, of course, Peter, James, and John, the big four. He knows all of them, and he can ask them whatever questions he wants to about what Jesus looked like when he was walking and talking in Galilee. So it would be like asking George Washington or asking Thomas Jefferson, what was George like? Asking Adams and John Quincy Adams and Monroe and so on. What do you know about George? And then it'd be really cool if you could talk to Martha. And that's neat because we have the women's testimony for going to the tomb and so on. So you make a multifaceted case for George Washington being the first president of the United States. We can do the same thing with Jesus actually having existed. And as Bart Ehrman says, he knows of nobody, no accredited specialist in the field of religion, no matter how liberal or how atheist or whatever, none of them who will have university, college, or seminary positions, none of them teach that Jesus never lived. The guys who teach it and claim to be scholars are people who don't have accredited degrees. He said with two exceptions, is Bart's count. The rest do not have accredited degrees, and none of them have university positions.
Why are they making such a big splash, do you think?
All right, that's important. When we start talking about people, we got to look at everybody. What was their degree in? When we start talking about, I'm not banging on the conscious community. I understand Black Power. I understand Black Power. The kingdom is a whole nother thing, but trust me, just you and me, I ain't confused. I understand Black Power. I understand history. I understand slavery. I understand racism. I understand stuff that was done. But we got to be careful when we're dealing with this stuff. These people that are writing, these people, they're scholars that they look up to. Kersey Graves, the scholars that they, Anthony Browder is the other brother's name from the Rock Newman show. He stayed talking about Jesus and Osiris and all of that stuff. He's another one that's part of the echo chamber, and they watch his videos and they learn. And that's what they do when they talk about, I did my research. They watching some Anthony Browder. They watching a little bit of Side Netta. They watching some Ray Hagen. This is a real reverend right here. He gonna tell you the Bible ain't nothing but myths. They gave it to us and da-da-da-da-da. Every Sunday collecting offering. Every Sunday still reading out the Bible. Wednesday night still. Every time he come to go quote unquote lecture, he lecturing from the Bible and tearing down the Bible. He using the Bible to tear down the Bible because he said that's all you people know. So I got to give y'all the Bible and break down the deep science of the Bible to y'all. Let me bring this other thing up right here. This is something. Oh, this will just take us off somewhere else. So does that mean the Bible is obsolete? It was written before 1950. No, but because he's dealing with scholarship, but scholarship have grown. So things that we once believed about the Bible in the 1800s and the 1700s and what people believe about the Bible now, some things have changed because of discoveries. Like the Dead Sea Scroll, we got a better understanding on the culture and the background of the people, the language. We got better understanding on different things. This part of the world wasn't open to certain things like when Bruce came back from Ethiopia with the Book of Enoch. So things have changed, people understanding. Let me see what this was something that was popular in Second Temple. How can I see correlations in here? Or was James and John and Peter, Second Temple people, influenced by this work that just popped up on the scene that we're understanding? And how can we connect that and the temple and the construction of the temple and different things that were discovered later on? How can we connect that with our knowledge of the Bible? But that's a good question right there. That's a whole different subject right here. Let me continue playing this right here, and then we're gonna jump to some other stuff.
Probably because they infiltrate almost every website there is and have a bunch of. They have a loud presence. Whatever side you're on. Recently, there was a choice for Supreme Court justice in this country. How come the voices that made it on the news shows were the little chattering voices that ran next to the senators and got up in their ear and chirped at them and wouldn't let them sit down at the tables, and because that kind of thing makes the news. And people said, whoa. And when they say, oh no, and they pretend like they're scholars, and but they don't have any training, they haven't been in the field, and all the other scholars, atheists even like Bart Ehrman, say they're wrong. So to me, that's the real test. It's not just Christians saying they're wrong. It's non-Christian scholars saying they don't have a chance.
And the reason that a lot of us would use, let me close that up right there. The reason a lot of us would use Bart Ehrman is because if I automatically go to Gary Habermas, he's a fundamentalist, he's a Christian. Oh, all you Christians just gonna quote the Christians. Oh, you Christians ain't got no proof. You just quote the Bible. Proof to me without using the Bible. They say crazy stuff, and then when you start quoting sources to them, they be on some. Oh, you love the white Jesus. I bet you get that pastor all your money. They say, no, brother, stop talking stupid right now. Get back to this Kersey Graves and what religion he had, Spiritism. Matter of fact, let me bring up that Mesrum stuff, Spiritism. Now, the subject that we're dealing with, because I jump all over the place, is called mythicism. There's a lot of people that believe when we start dealing, and I'll talk, like I said, when we get back to the lodge subject and when you see different positions in the Masonic lodge, how that's connected with the movement of the sun and how the East is important and the rising of the sun. We'll later connect that to light bearer. And I got to take it slow because some people and some Masons would be confused and, because y'all want to call the devil Lucifer, and technically speaking, are they the same beings? And there's different beings you need to talk to, and it was different watches, and you could say what you want. Elohim is a plural. It was a bunch of them running around here, and there's a whole nother thing right there. But let me get into some of this right here.
In episode 1, we introduced the Christ myth
Fair
theory
use.
and the academic consensus on the historicity of Jesus. And in episodes 2 and 3, we talked about the primary sources used when discussing the life of Jesus of Nazareth. In this episode, though, we're finally going to look at the history of the Christ myth theory, from its origins in the Enlightenment to its resurgence in the 21st century on the internet. Let's get started. The earliest known mythicists were a pair of French writers, Constantin-François de Chassaubeuf, Comte de Volnay, and Charles-François Dupuy. I'd apologize for butchering those names, but they're French, so I'm not going to. In the 1780s, Volnay went on an expedition across the Ottoman Empire.
All right, let me before I even get into it, these guys are important. When we start talking about Varney, Count Varney, he wrote a book called Ruins of Empire. Another book, heavy in the penitentiary, heavy with Dr. Ben and them, heavy with Sinet and all of them in the everybody. These are all mandatory readings if you're in the conscious community. I don't know nobody that don't have this alongside Dr. Ben, alongside Gerald Massey, alongside Kersey Gray, alongside Alvin Van Serty, alongside Sheikh Ante Diop, alongside Charles Finch. All of this stuff just goes together. It's like choir robes and hymns and microphones that all just go together. So we got to understand that these guys, if I pull up, matter of fact, I may do that right now, Bart Ehrman's book, another atheist PhD that deals with the history, deals with the language, deals with the manuscripts and the early Christian or the early Jesus movement. He says in the book the same thing that this guy says, Count Varney. More occultist, Count Varney and his man Charles. In France, these were the first people on the planet. Find somebody else. These were the first people on the planet to say Jesus did not exist. This is just a myth from the sun. And we got older stories. Count Varney in the 1700s, him and his man Charles. These were the first to show and prove that we got some of this from the first century. We got rabbis hating on Jesus, say he burned it in hell. They bear witness he existed. Because he was a miracle worker. He went to Egypt and he beguiled the people with magic. They bear witness he was existing. These two European gentlemen were the first ones on the planet, and it spread. It spread from France, it spread to England, and it spread to the Americas. This is where Dorothy Murdoch and Tim Harper, this is where they got their doctrine from. This is where Ray Hagen doctrine come from. This is where Kevin Wesley doctrine come from. This is where all these ex-pastors, quote, 16 crucified saviors, this is where their doctrine come from. Two white guys in France. Fair use.
Stopping in Egypt and Syria in order to learn Arabic. While on this journey, he took notes, which he eventually published as Travels in Egypt and Syria in 1788. He was also a member of the Estates General and the National Assembly after the French Revolution broke out in 1789. Inspired by the revolutionary zeal of the era, Volnay would publish his most famous work, The Ruins, or A Survey of the Revolutions of Empires. The book gives a prediction that at some point in the future, all religions would merge into one after they recognized the universal truth underlying all of them. As a side note, the first English translation of this was actually done by Thomas Jefferson when Volnay visited Monticello back in 1796. But due to the book's anti-Christian tone and the election happening that year, he did not want his name attached to this project, and so he refused to translate the chapters of the books that had the anti-Christian tone and asked that his name not be attached to the translation. Working alongside Volnay and very much influenced by his work was Dupuy, who had studied astronomy and mythology, which led him to publishing his most notable work, Origin of All Cults, or Universal Religion, in 1795. This work was so influential that it was one of the motivating factors behind Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. Volnay and Dupuy both believed that Jesus was not a historical figure, and that Christianity was an amalgamation of other Near Eastern mythologies. This would give birth to what I refer to as the comparative religion methodology, which focuses on comparing stories and themes found in early Christian literature with other ancient religions. Those who use this methodology believe that the existence of similarities is enough to believe that there was some kind of spiritual plagiarism. And if one thing is plagiarized, then everything else must be plagiarized as well. Ergo, Jesus didn't exist. This methodology would become the most popular, despite the fact that it is also the weakest, but we'll cover that more in a later episode. The comparative religion methodology would continue its popularity in the following decades, but it would have to rebuild itself across the English Channel. Due to both Volney and Dupuy being associated with the head-chopping French Revolution, their works would have little influence outside of France after the fall of Napoleon. But in the 1830s, it would re-emerge from the mind of Godfrey Higgins in his work Anacalypsis. Higgins studied the law but was never permitted to practice it, and when Napoleon threatened to...
Godfrey Higgins, another popular book, very, very popular book, along with Gerald Massey, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World.
...invade the UK, he joined a militia up near York and retired in 1808 at the rank of major. He was also a political reformer, advocating for the abolishment of child labor, better treatment for people in insane asylums, as well as calling for the disestablishment of the Church of Ireland. It was later in life that Higgins became interested in ancient myths, along with serving as a member in several neo-Druid organizations at the time. In a 3-volume work called The Celtic Druids, he argued that the beliefs and practices of the Druids came from Indian priests, who he also believed had built Stonehenge. Higgins would die before finishing his final work, Anacalypsis, which was supposed to be a history of all religions, which he believed all originated in India and Atlantis. Around the same time we saw the rebirth of the Christ myth theory in England, we saw it emerge in Germany, but in a very different form thanks to the work of Leopold von Ranke. Von Ranke revolutionized the field of history by putting an emphasis on using primary sources and differentiating them from secondary sources. You can learn more about von Ranke from this video by the Cynical Historian, but suffice it to say that von Ranke made the next methodology of the Christ myth theory possible. Along with von Ranke's standardization of historical study, we also need historical criticism, also referred to as higher criticism, which is a field of studying ancient religious documents for their historical context as well as the historicity of the events described in them. One of the first writers to put these methods into practice on the person of Jesus was Lutheran theologian David Friedrich Strauss, whose work, The Life of Jesus, critically examined, was the first biography of Jesus that didn't assume his divinity, and treated the New Testament documents skeptically, especially when it came to miracles. Strauss himself was not a mythicist, but his writings would form the ground for future mythicists, including ones that had attacked him, such as Bruno Bauer. Bruno Bauer had been a student of Hegel, and in the 1830s he led an attack against Strauss, who had criticized Hegel's methodology in The Life of Jesus and other works. Bauer would first attack the historicity of Jesus in 1841 when he published Criticism of the Gospel History of the Synoptics. Bauer didn't outright say that Jesus never existed, but that the Gospels are an irrelevant source for learning about him. At this point he could be described as a soft mythicist, but by the 1850s he would enter the hard mythicist camp by publishing Criticism of the Pauline Epistles and a Critique of the Gospels and the History of their origins. Bauer was not very influential during his lifetime, but since his death he has become more influential among mythicists. Between Strauss and Bauer, we see the birth of what I would call the source criticism methodology of the Christ myth theory. This methodology focuses on questioning the reliability and authenticity of the primary sources discussed in episodes 2 and 3. Bruno Bauer continued to contribute to the Christ myth theory into the 1870s when he published Christ and the Caesars, where he argued that Christianity was a syncretism between Roman Stoicism and Jewish mystery cults, which falls within the realm of the comparative religion methodology. But at this time, we've finally seen an American begin to contribute to the Christ myth theory, Kersey Graves. Born in 1813 to Quaker parents in Pennsylvania, Graves' early life is full of uncertainty. Some sources claim that he had no formal education, and others claim that he had an academic education. Regardless of what kind of education he had, by the age of 18 he had become a teacher in Richmond, Virginia. In the 1840s he spent time living in utopian communes and experimenting with many new religions, but eventually abandoning religion altogether. His contribution to the Christ myth theory came in 1875 with The World's 16 Crucified Saviors, where he compares the story of Jesus in the New Testament to figures in other mythologies. This book heavily borrows from Anacalypsis, though he never cites Higgins or anyone for that matter, and that's something you'll find very common amongst 19th century mythicists. Back in England, we have another mythicist contributing to the comparative religion methodology in the 1880s, Gerald Massey. Gerald Massey was a poet who claimed to have taught himself hieroglyphics by spending a lot of time at the British Museum. His first book on the Christ myth theory, The Natural Genesis, was published in 1883, and it made the claim that the story of Jesus was a retelling of the story of Horus, which is a claim you will find a lot among mythicists. Just like
Wait a minute, I got to stop that right there. That's one of the things that got some of us scared. These mystical folk. Charles Finch said that Alvin Van Sertima had a bi-monthly coming out of Rutgers, a bi-monthly magazine coming out. And in that book, he said that Gerald Massey's wife used to have seances at the house. They were spiritists. He was a chief druid. A chariot S, and everybody bear witness that he was a druid. So y'all already know he part of them European priests, and over there he was the chief druid. Not no regular one. He was the chief druid. He hung out in, because what's his name? I forget the other guy was his man. He hung out in the museum. Is that how it works? Is that how it works? Because y'all do know right now that legit Egyptologists out here in these universities, all in Cairo, all up and down Europe, all over the place, don't really bear witness with him, because he went and he learned it on his own. He learned it. He just hanging out there. He just learned it on his own, and listen to the doctrines that he came up with. And this is how come you have other people, tour guides, taking you back to Kemet now because of Gerald Massey. Look at the wall. Look at the Metu Netta. This is virgin birth. And y'all do know the primary source. Y'all know the story of Osiris? How he died and he got cut up into pieces? Wife couldn't find the phallus, and she put it together. Then she got on top of it and wrote it, and that's how that sound like a virgin birth to y'all? Yo, I'm good.
Like Kersey Graves, Gerald Massey was also heavily influenced by Higgins. And also like Graves, he never cited Higgins, despite the fact that all three of them tell the same stories in almost the exact same way. And none of them are citing sources to back up their claims. Around the turn of the century, there was a resurgence of mythicism. British anthropologist Sir James George Frazer published the first edition of The Golden Bough in 1890, which looked at religious traditions around the world, and it became very influential.
This is another one. This is a thick one, but this is another one. He talk about a whole. This is like, to me, this is like 16 crucified, not 16. This is like secret teachings of all ages. This is a thick one with a whole bunch of stuff in there. And it was what was going on at the time. It's a whole bunch of other stuff. But these people have an agenda. These people, they're following a tradition because they're part of fraternities. They're part of groups that want to wake people up from the stupor of Christianity. Want you to understand self and who you are as self. And everyone had to play a role to bring us to where we are now, where everybody's pushing Christ consciousness. We're Christ, we're gods. We're divine beings. We're one with the universe. Connect with your higher self. Talk to your angel. All of that stuff came because of a history of people starting to share their doctrine that came from their fraternities.
Influential amongst mythicists, despite the fact that Frazer himself was not a mythicist. This became such a big issue for Frazer that in the 1913 edition of the book, he had to state that his theory assumed the existence of a historical Jesus. In 1900, a Scottish member of the UK Parliament, John Mackinnon Robertson, argued that Jesus never was a living person, but rather a new deity made up by a first-century Jewish messianic cult to pray for harvests. And he used sources from the Talmud to back up his claims. There was also the English schoolmaster George Robert Stowe Mead, who in 1903 argued that Jesus of the Gospels was actually referring to a character from the Talmud who was executed about a century earlier than Jesus was believed to have been crucified. These and others gave birth to the third major methodology of the Christ myth theory, the literary reinterpretation methodology. This methodology focuses on reinterpreting old documents to mean things that they weren't traditionally thought to have meant. A common argument from these mythicists is that the Pauline epistles were not referring to a flesh and blood Jesus, but rather a spiritual or allegorical Jesus. But the biggest name among mythicists at this
and that's where, besides ancient Egypt, light of the world, Gerald Massey wrote another book, being a Druid, a lot of them dudes teaching the same thing, the historical Jesus and the mystical Christ. A lot of people want to People, and we're hearing it now. A lot of people want to argue that Paul never saw Christ. Paul never met Jesus. He met the mystical Christ, and Paul was a Gnostic. And you'll hear people floating around ideas like this. None of y'all never seen Jesus. In all actuality, it's not a real man, but it's waking up the Christ in you. The stories of Jesus, all these myths, all these truths that come down, you get a tingling in your feeling, thinking you're getting the Holy Ghost, but that's really serpent energy coming. So when you start having visions, you can prophesy, you can see things to come. That's all part of you opening up your third eye. That's all gifted to Lucifer. That's the Lucifer inside of you. That's the serpent energy inside of you. Forget Holy Spirit stuff. Nonsense. This Kundalini, and everybody got it. Some people is woke, some people is not woke. Wake up the divine spark within you. This is the nonsense they teaching.
This time was German scholar Arthur Drews, who published the Christ myth in 1909, contributing to the comparative religion methodology. This work was so influential that for about the next decade, you had actual theologians debating whether or not a historical flesh and blood Jesus is necessary for Christianity to be considered a true religion. Some argue that you didn't need a flesh and blood historical Jesus for it to be true, but those who did quickly lost their orthodox credentials. Ultimately, Drew's book was rejected by both theologians and biblical scholars. However, the book is still used by mythicists. Mythicism would remain pretty quiet during the 20th century, living on mostly in the Soviet Union, where it remained part of the Communist Party line at Soviet universities until the 1970s. But just as Soviet universities were abandoning the Christ myth theory, a British professor would revive interest in it within this English-speaking world. In 1975, George Albert Wells would publish Did Jesus Exist? Wells was the professor of German at London University, who wrote extensively about German intellectual history. Aside from Strauss, Bauer, and Drews, there were many writers from 19th century Germany that wrote on the Christ myth theory, but due to the language barrier, these ideas did not go far outside of Germany. This meant that the source criticism methodology remained, and up to now largely still is, dominated by German scholars. Wells didn't contribute much in the way of new research for the Christ myth theory. Rather, what Wells did was introduce mythicist texts and ideas to an English-speaking audience that didn't have access to them before. He continued this path with his later publications, such as The Historical Evidence for Jesus in 1982, and Who Was Jesus? A Critique of the New Testament Record in 1989. Wells passed away in early 2017, and by that point his position on the
I'm sorry, the name of this is the history of the Christ myth theory.
The Christ myth theory had evolved. Back in 1975, he was a hard mythicist, believing that there never was or could have been a historical Jesus. But by the time of his death, he had slid into becoming a soft mythicist, believing that there was a historical Jesus, but that the New Testament had nothing to do with him. Unlike most mythicists I came across, Wells was the only one that modified his thesis with every criticism it received, which ultimately led to his final position on the subject. After Wells, we get other writers whose primary contribution to the conversation is introducing older ideas to a new audience. In the 1990s, we get Robert M. Price, who has the notable distinction of being the only mythicist with a PhD in New Testament or biblical studies. Price's major contribution has been the reintroduction of the literary reinterpretation methodology. Price's rendition of it argues that the Gospels are actually a form of Haggadah Midrash about a Jewish wisdom figure described in the Talmud and the Old Testament. But if you look into Price's bibliography, he has done far more for the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft than he has for the debate over the historicity of Jesus. Alongside Dr. Price, we also have Richard Carrier, who got his start as an editor for an atheist activist group. Carrier has the distinction of being the only mythicist to have ever had a PhD in ancient history. His recent contribution was an attempt to disprove the historicity of Jesus through Bayesian theory. I still don't know which methodology that this would fall under, but my best guess at the moment is source criticism. More and more modern mythicists try to fuse all these methodologies together, but what this ends up doing is that their books don't really have enough evidence to support any of the arguments at all. But finally, we get to the 21st century, and although books continue to be published on the subject, the biggest driver of the Christ myth theory today is the internet and documentaries. Starting in 2005 with The God Who Wasn't There, exploding with Zeitgeist the movie, and continuing with the most recent release, Batman and Jesus, the Christ myth theory continues to exist despite all evidence to the contrary. Now, this, of course, is not an exhaustive history of the Christ myth theory, but rather a timeline of the biggest points that anyone familiarizing themselves with the subject should know. So if you're interested in learning more about the Christ myth theory, I have listed my sources down in the description below, and amongst those sources you will find some affiliate links to Amazon, where if you buy those books or anything else through those affiliate links, it will financially support this channel. I would like to thank my generous patrons for helping me make this video possible, especially my executive producer, Leo Hawkhauser. Thanks to your support, I can continue to make these videos to educate and entertain. If you would like to know more about becoming a patron, then you can go to patreon.com/GrantHurst to learn more. You can also get perks such as getting to see videos early, as well as getting your name in the end credits of videos. If you enjoyed this video, then you should...
All right, enough of that. All right, so y'all see when we start dealing with this Christ myth thing that this thing is a serious problem. I played him his video. His video was worth it because he ran down the whole history in 13 minutes. Y'all heard a lot of names: Kersey Graves, Gerald Massey, until we came up to Richard M. Price, Milwaukee Atheist. I believe that's the YouTube channel. Matter of fact, I was watching Garfield on there the other night, talking about the Israelites. Milwaukee Atheist. Price is on there. Price is on there a lot. They got an atheist Sunday school where they discuss certain things. Now, we say that Price is a problem, but Price isn't open to debates. And Richard Carrier is the only one. Y'all hear me right now? Richard Carrier is the only one. He got a MDiv, I think if I'm correct, Robert M. Price got an MDiv. He used to be, he got a seminary degree. He's not a dummy. He got a real degree in the field. But when we look at the amount of people, when we look at the amount of books, when we look how heavily this ex-pastors movement, the conscious movement, relies on Gerald Massey, it's a problem. Relies on Kersey Graves, it's a problem. How many degreed people are part of that? Acheria S don't have it. Peter Joseph, his degree, he got it from North Carolina. He got a bachelor's in art. How you writing a whole book on history? But now the question comes in, why would the History Channel, Easter time, Christmas time, Gaia, what's this other Gaia channel on here with all these aliens and all this occult doctrine and doubting and tearing down the Bible and lifting up the nonsense? Jesus was married. Jesus was kissing a man. All this. And what would make these people use individuals? What would make the History Channel use people that don't have PhDs in the field, that are not specialists from universities? They do here and there, and they're always going to get the fringe people. I need to pull up that fringe pop to show y'all how some of this stuff worked with some other people that were involved in strange things. And this is where we can talk about Mike Heiser. He speaks on it, the Jesus Seminar, Clausen and them. I could pull up some people from there and how these quote unquote specialists, but they got an agenda. Specialists roll balls out. And they figure, well, Jesus probably said that. Roll another ball. He probably, there's a good chance he didn't say it. And they just running around guesswork. They just running around. And I'm talking about, mainstream. Matter of fact, I'm gonna play some of that video. Let me show you the book first. I want to show y'all the book that gets in. I think he have a chapter in here that gets into the same thing. I don't know why every time I click on this thing and try to pull up a book from my Kindle, it's telling me I have too many downloads. I got to repurchase the book. I got it on too many devices or something crazy. Did Jesus exist? This is right here, Bart Ehrman. He'll get into the whole thing and he'll tell you about Kant Von Lee and his partner Charles Dupuis, I believe that's his name. I'll pull his name up right now so everybody can see this. But this book right here, Did Jesus Exist? That's important. That's where that comes from. Besides what that gentleman is saying on that channel, like I said, Bart Ehrman's an atheist, but he got the history down packed. This is what he deals with. We played Gary Habermas earlier, foremost scholar on the resurrection of Jesus. I think he said he had 1,260 sources, and I don't know how many different languages dealing with the resurrection, but he explains that Bart Ehrman had 15 sources within 100 years. 15 sources within 100 years of the life of Jesus. That's he knocking Socrates, he knocking them Greek dudes, he knocking Alexander the Great, he knocking a whole bunch of people out of the park. If you got that many sources outside the Bible. Outside the Bible, because for some reason, Massey and them done fooled these folk to think that there's nothing outside of the Bible, so they don't look outside of the Bible, and they depend on what a chariot say. They depend on what Charles and them say. Oh, outside the Bible, you Christians got nothing. You can't prove Jesus outside the Bible. You can't do this. You can't do that. Nothing existed. What's the other book? The book you're on, and this is a compilation of people too. Now, these ain't recommended readings. I tell you, I got ill books. The book your church don't want you to read. They say Bethlehem never existed. I'm like, these folks so soon, it don't make no sense. Bethlehem never existed. Bethlehem means house of bread. And I know that Carlton Pearson got a hold of 16 Crucified Saviors and Godfrey's book. I know he got a hold of that. You got to understand he's talking about the age. It's not the end of the world. The end of the age really came because we moved into a new house of Aquarius. You got to understand what bread means. And Jesus with the pitcher of water, the 12 tribes got to do with the 12 zodiacs. We got to pick up a part 2 on this right here. This nonsense. And if you don't know any better, it sounds good. I remember one time back in the days, them folk, when they started doubting in 1800, they said David never existed. Solomon never existed. Hittites, Canaanites, these terms never existed until they got among some Assyrian ruins and they found out, wow, the Assyrians went to war with Hittites. Only other source on the planet that mentioned Hittites was the Bible. They said Hittites never existed until they found some Assyrian sources later on. So scholarship helps. Scholarship helps clear some things up. Sometimes them scholars will get to doing what they want to do. And that's where we can sometimes have problems. Let me show y'all this first. Let me just show y'all this right here. This is from the guy Count Vonley right here. And the other guy, Charles, was just Constantine, Francisco, and all of this stuff right here. We just call him Count Vonley. He wrote Ruins of Empire. Like I said, it's a popular book back in the days. I'm sliding down here. Vonley, this Christ myth theory, that's what the subject that we're dealing with. Christ myth theory, Vonley and Charles Dupuis. This is his man right here. He was the main one pushing it. Now, Vonley came to the States, and he ain't want his name to be connected with it. And, you know, he was up there with Monticello. He was up there rocking out with Thomas Jeff. All these folk knew each other. Benjamin Franklin, all these folk knew each other. James, all these folk, everybody know everybody. Everybody was doing something. So he came up here, and he ain't really want to be connected with it. And later on, Thomas Jefferson, it kind of was edited a little bit, but Thomas Jefferson gave the first English translation. But his man was one of the first ones pushing it. So then later on, you'll start hearing people say, well, the 12 zodiacs and the 12 tribes of Israel and all of this stuff is connected. And it's really only a solar mythos. Astrotheology will hear words like that. And a lot of them are pushing that. Y'all don't know this. And then we'll see myths all on Facebook. We'll see on memes on Facebook. The sun, S-U-N, is the sun, S-O-N. Christians so dumb, it just don't even work in Hebrew. Just don't even work. The Christians so dumb, they don't understand that the sun is the sun. They don't understand that that Osiris was born on the 25th. Listen, did they even have a 25th? I mean, did they even have a December? Did they even have a December in Egypt back in the days? Or y'all just bringing anything together that sounds good? I like what the other guy said. He said, well, shoot, we might as well bring Dunkin' Donuts in there. They give you 12 donuts. They'll sell you a box of 12 donuts. We might as well put this and put it in the mix and throw it all together also. And this is what a lot of people are doing. There is a branch of scholarship that's fringe, and it's the weirdos that get the limelight on Gaia TV, on these videos, on the History Channel. It's these weirdos. I'm gonna play some of this right here, and then let me see how long I've been on here. Then we're gonna get out of here.
Attention homeowners.
On the historical Jesus. Quote, the Jesus Seminar has received a tremendous amount of attention as a result of its controversial procedures and results and its concerted marketing campaign. The seminar itself is almost exclusively made up of North American scholars, and it is founded and dominated by a few of the more radical Jesus scholars in the United States. Many of the major university religion departments, graduate schools, and seminaries are not represented at all, unquote. Now, Witherington goes on to point out that the goal of the Jesus Seminar from the outset was to very publicly undermine the traditional views of Jesus. The seminar began with their conclusions already in mind. And honestly, that really isn't scholarship. It is not objective thinking. Intentionally,
We get a lot of people that often do that. They're coming to the text and they already feel a certain type of way. He's saying that that's not scholarship, and a lot of people do that. They come to the text with a preconceived notion, and we got many people, because they already believe something, they're coming and reading the Bible. They don't even know how, people don't know how to train and separate themselves. Well, let me just see, is this what the Bible is saying? Because if I teach you that the Bible is saying this, when you read it, you're going to see that, because that's how you were trained. That's how you were brought up. When we start dealing with I forgot to mention, I don't know who in here saw it, but they said there was a I think Garfield had a debate with that dude Richard Carrier, with him and Damon Richardson. He's the only one with a PhD with history. But they said them apologists, they said Richardson put work in. I don't know, I didn't see it. I talked to Garfield the other day, but I ain't even, and I think that was a while back. I don't know. Maybe somebody saw it. They could share that information with y'all. But I heard that took place, I don't know, a few months back or something. You know, I don't really follow them people like that. Let me finish playing some more of this.
outside mainstream scholarship was excluded. Witherington writes again, and he says, quote, "One of the notable characteristics of the Jesus Seminar is that it is not a group sponsored by either of the two major scholarly guilds, the Society of Biblical Literature or the European Society for the Study of the New Testament. Instead, it is a group sponsored by the late New Testament scholar Robert W. Funk, who created his own publishing entity to publish what the seminar concluded. So membership in the Jesus Seminar only includes those who share the conclusions it begins with."
Now, he had his own publishing company. I could pull up Funk too. Yeah, I think he died not too long ago, 2005, something like that. I can't remember these dates. He had his own publishing company, and that's what a lot of these people do. If it's not a free thinking press, they don't deal with a lot of publishing houses. They want to deal with some stuff. They want to make sure it's scholarly. If it's going to universities, they want to make sure that, that's how people look for certain things like peer review and all of this stuff. A lot of stuff that was taught in the conscious community and that's sold in a lot of conscious bookstores, big publishing houses don't pick them up. So guys got over there on Atlantic Avenue. They got in Philly. They got in certain places, and they got old printing presses, and they started printing stuff up. Some people were getting books and Xeroxing books and then stapling them together, going to Staples and getting the thing and binding them together and making copies of old books from the early 1900s and just sending them to the prison, sending them on the block, giving them out so guys can discuss certain things in the barbershop. And they got a little more sophisticated. They was giving out a lot of books in Harlem, selling books at the table in the city. That's important. And there's a lot of books that you just couldn't find in Barnes and Noble and different places. And from the streets, from the prisons and from the streets, videos, and that's how Sinet and them got started, giving out VHS tapes and having lectures and then having those books that nobody wanted, self-published stuff. A lot of times stuff is self-published because people don't want to pick it up because they don't know, like, what is this nonsense? What is this pseudo? Has this been, a lot of big publishing houses don't want to take a chance with it. But it's money and mythicism. So people started doing their own thing. It's money and conscious teaching. This is the underground stream, and part of the conspiracy is the white man don't want you to know this. We can't publish these books because the government don't want, the Pope, the Vatican don't want you to know the deep teachings Jesus ain't exist. You are Jesus. That story is about the black man and all of that stuff like that. And so it's a reason that this is kind of an underground stream, but it's been heavily helped because of the internet. Fair use.
and it's idiosyncratically exclusive of mainstream New Testament scholarship, and it self-publishes its results to avoid peer review, unquote. Well, that's nice. That is a recipe, again, for radical, idiosyncratic, self-serving scholarship. And this is how mainstream New Testament scholars, like Witherington and many others, assess the Jesus Seminar, because the Jesus Seminar was very transparent from the beginning that this is what it's trying to do. And you run into this on the internet or on TV, and it makes the presentations make it sound like the Jesus Seminar speaks for the majority of New Testament scholars and mainstream New Testament scholarship. And that simply is not the case. Now, the Jesus Seminar, as we mentioned, starts with certain assumptions out of the gate and then looks to mold and craft a procedure and a theory to justify the assumptions and conclusions that it begins with. And this is all about the Jesus of the Gospels. Intentionally, they are trying to undermine the traditional face value reading of the Gospel sources. Here are some examples of their assumptions. Number one, they believe that Jesus was actually illiterate. He couldn't read or write. Number two, Jesus had no interest in Scripture, which of course makes sense. If he can't read, why would he be interested in it? Third, Jesus had no interest in eschatology, that is, the time of the end, sort of his place in history toward the end of days and being a messianic figure. And that leads to number four. Jesus, according to the Jesus Seminar, did not think of himself at all as Israel's Messiah or in any sense divine. So in other words, some of these scholars think that almost everything of importance that is affirmed in the New Testament gospel stories, that all that stuff is just wrong. It's misguided. Again, these are the seminar's starting points. These ideas don't derive from research. This is where they begin. The Jesus Seminar meets twice yearly to discuss the gospel content among its members and vote. They actually vote on the authenticity of the material. They use a color-coded system of balloting. They use colored marbles, in fact, which is kind of comical when you think about it. They're playing marbles that correspond to a reliability scale. Red means that Jesus said it or something pretty much like it. Pink means Jesus probably said that. Gray is it's doubtful Jesus said it. And black is this is to be totally rejected. Jesus never.
What type of scholarship is this? These folk running around here shooting dice. These scholars running around, and these are the ones that the TV would give shine. That certain, you know, the History Channel is, y'all know the History Channel is pseudo, right? Fair use.
Said this. In the early years of the Jesus Seminar, these votes became the basis of color-coded editions of the Gospels or parts of the Gospels. For instance, again, this is all self-published. The Jesus Seminar might publish editions of the Gospels, the full Gospels, or just maybe, for example, the parables, a little book on the parables. And it would color code what Jesus really said or certainly didn't say for really the gullible readership. Now, here's what the Lord's Prayer would look like in terms of the Jesus Seminar.
And I want y'all to know that's important why he would say it's self-published, because they don't have to deal with certain things. When we start talking about certain stuff ain't peer-reviewed, when we deal with the books and the conscious community, when we deal with the statements that's being made, the whole movement, the whole education of the movement. How many people? That's how come we asked the question, even when Jabari and them jumped up on the scene, and when everybody was involved in that, we asked the question, how many scholars do they have in that field? Any movement that's starting, how many scholars do you have in the field that's making the statements that y'all are making? People could say what they want in this Jesus movement. I'm talking about this biblical Jesus movement right here. We got a good bit of people with MDivs. We got a good bit of a PhD. We got a good bit of theologians. We got a good bit of degreed up folk in here. A good bit of folk. This stuff ain't just blind folk just moving around crazy. We got a good bit of it. So when these other people come and they start making statements and challenging things and saying stuff like, no, wait a minute, we're going back to the church fathers. Wait a minute, we're going back to manuscripts. Wait a minute, we're going back to history and writing. Wait a minute, we're going back to the text. We're going back to all this stuff, and we're going to take this time and trace this thing slow. And we're going to see what this thing is saying. And a lot of people don't have that. So what do? Self-publish, spread it on the internet. That's all right. Our movement is going to jump anyway. Oh, it's going to jump because it's on the internet. It's going to jump because you don't want it to be challenged. It's going to jump because y'all get out here with memes. And that's what the conscious community has been doing. They getting out here with memes, and they got books, but they'll self-publish them, and they'll go around being peer-reviewed. How many people writing? How many of y'all scholars got some stuff in peer-reviewed articles that's recognized and taught in universities? That's fair. That's fair. Go to SciNet and them. Go to SciNet and look at Dr. Ben's funeral. I can't be mad. My other people were saying the same thing. They're like, boy, them people don't check, boy. Just put down there, you got a master's degree. I'm like, yo, how you get that? Oh, Father God, y'all ill. Go to what what's the brother name that was doing the open of the mouth ceremony and all of that on Dr. Ben's body in the funeral over there in Harlem. They had to have that in the church. Y'all know Al Sharpton will put up. Let me leave that alone. But Dr. Ben, the scholar Dr. Ben, go look and listen to his obituary and just listen to what's read. That's all. When we get to the educational part, just listen to what's read. I'm talking about the great Dr. Ben. I love Dr. Ben. I got every single book Dr. Ben ever wrote. I got one of his right now. I'm trying to rebuild my library. I've been doing so much moving, losing stuff in storage and floods and all type of crazy stuff. But listen, look at that obituary. That's all I'm saying. People would get out here and get to printing up their own books. They would start meeting in bookstores. They would send people to, let me get my secretary in them to go down here and go to Staple and copy and print up some books and just highlight some stuff and get up there with some slides and just get to talking. A lot of this doctrine spread in these underground bookstores. A lot of these doctrines just spread on VHS tapes. Now we running around here, got all these iPhones and all of this stuff. Folk just turning cameras on and they talking. Don't sound like you know a little bit what you're talking about. You ain't got to show and prove nothing. Sound like you know what you're talking about, and that's it. Folk ain't gonna even question you, especially people that don't understand methodologies and how can I check this out? What you're saying, brother? What type of source is this? Once in a while, you're running to some people that been to college, but they don't care. Because now this stuff is on the college campuses. Historical black colleges is on the campuses right now. These white folk wicked, these white folk lying. We created everything. We the gods from another planet. Anunnaki coming back for us. Not knowing the whole time all these doctrines come from Europeans, and it's not as old as these people claiming to go all the way back to Africa. No, it didn't. Them mystics gave it to y'all, and a lot of them were Freemasons, a lot of them were involved in secret societies, and they had an agenda against the church because they wanted to promote a doctrine. Now, the doctrine may go back. Gnosticism, the doctrine may go back. Don't get it twisted. It was a doctrine in that garden. You shall be gods. And that doctrine is present among us today. I'm going to play the rest of this and get out of here. Abu in here? Kevin G in here?
Take a good look at this, remembering that black is stuff that Jesus never would have said at all, and gray is, he probably never said that. According to the Jesus Seminar, the only thing that Jesus said for sure, again, the red, in the Lord's Prayer, was, Our Father. That's it. That's a pretty short prayer. A few phrases are considered probable, among them, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, give us this day our daily bread.
Can we use your home to showcase one of our new roofing styles or colors? We need showcase homes of all shapes.
And that's pretty much it. Everything else in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus never actually said, according to the Jesus Seminar. I guess it's easier to memorize this way, but there you go. This is what they're doing, and they're publishing. And their work actually gets marketed very well on the impulse shelves on grocery stores every year. So the next time you see a TV show about the historical Jesus versus the Christ of faith, and the Jesus Seminar is mentioned, this is what you're getting. Now, it should be clear that the fundamental problem with the Jesus Seminar is it's intentional, not subconscious. It's intentional bias. The Jesus Seminar openly begins with a set of assumptions and then goes in search of data to prove those assumptions. In real world clear thinking, the opposite is how things are done. You first examine data and then you draw conclusions. Let's just take a look at some of the examples of the assumptions that the Jesus Seminar makes or starts with. Remember, according to the Jesus Seminar, Jesus had no interest in Scripture. And of course, he was illiterate. So he has no interest in the Hebrew Bible or what we call the Old Testament. Now, this makes zero sense. Jesus was, at a minimum, a religious teacher. So what did he teach his Jewish audience if he had no interest in their Bible? What did he teach them? In reality, the New Testament Gospels have Jesus quoting from well over half the books of the Hebrew Bible. In fact, Jesus quotes from all the books of the Torah and most of the prophets. So this assumption, again, this is just one example, is just nonsense. And for the Jesus Seminar, its conclusions are only as good as its assumptions. And this is a deeply flawed assumption. Again, Jesus, the Jewish religious teacher, teaching a Jewish audience, but having no interest in their Bible. How does that make sense? It's no wonder that the Jesus Seminar is viewed by most New Testament scholars as sort of a curiosity at best. Thanks for watching this episode of Fringe Pop 321. Please come back and watch more of our episodes. And don't forget to visit our website, fp321.com, for more detail and more source material.
All right, let me see. I can close up all of this stuff right now. All right, I think I've been going. All right, I'm going almost 2 hours. So when y'all hear me, I'm gonna explain some other stuff. When y'all hear me get into this other portion later on, when we start dealing with the church and these secret orders, and how some people couldn't be involved with certain things, and the compatibility of a Bible believer with these secret societies, and historically the doctrines that they've been pushing. I'm explaining to y'all when I talk about those people, Pike and all of them, they were considered leaders in the movement. They did a lot in the movement. So when we talk about them, there'll be a few people that would say things like, well, they don't speak for us. Let me see if I can pull that other thing. Well, they don't speak for us, and stuff like that is a problem. Hold on. Did Abu say he was in here? Because I'm gonna have to. I can't lie. I'm troubled. I heard some stuff, and they said that they were gonna drop some stuff. So they said they were gonna drop some stuff, and now that the stuff is out, we got to figure it out. Hold on. And when I say stuff like, what's this other thing? When I say stuff like what is a monitor? What is a monitor? And I'm going to explain that those are like magazines, like Sunday school material, Watchtower material, stuff that's coming off the printing press in the Mormon church, and it goes out to everybody. They have different monitors, and what I'm gonna quote to you is gonna be coming from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. It's gonna be coming from the Indiana. Different states have Grand Lodges. Grand Lodges drop these monitors like I said, like Sunday school material or teaching material. And we're gonna kind of get into the history of the Scottish Rite and different people, and how, and kind of what the doctrine of these people push, and then we'll deal with the signs and symbols, how we use signs historically, how humanity have used signs, and how people have come down to use some different signs today. Let me go back and try to look at some of this right here. I might play some of this video, the one last video, but I definitely have to. I definitely have to get me something. I definitely have to get me something to drink right now. I've been doing a lot of talking, reading, all this. I know I don't do all of this carrying on right here, but let me stop this. I thought I stopped this video. Let me stop this right here and pull just a little bit of this up right here so you can see a believer. Y'all know Walter Martin is another gentleman, been doing this, degreed up, went on to be with the Lord, and this is kind of what he do. And I think this was on If I'm correct, let me see. If I'm correct, this video might have been on. Let me see if I can set this up and play it off of here. Can I do it like that?
This entire hour will be devoted to a dialogue with Luther Mize, who will actively defend the Masonic position. Luther is a Christian, and he will advocate the position that it's all right for a Christian to be a Mason. Obviously, I disagree, as you will soon see. All Masons are required to take secret oaths, a practice, I might add, that the Bible strenuously forbids. Masonry does not take a stand on the blood atonement of Jesus Christ or his bodily resurrection, two central facts that are fundamental to the belief system of historic Christianity. Because of the Kabbalah and a host of other well-documented writings from ancient occultic lore and its relationship to Masonry, I believe that Freemasonry is indeed a cult with severe occultic overtones. This is definitely a religion that any active Christian should avoid. Historically, Freemasonry has only used a sprinkling of Christian terminology to cover up Masonry's real roots, which are embedded deeply in the occult. Even their most revered writers and spokesmen maintain this position. Albert Pike and others wrote that Masonry was not only not Christian, but is instead occultic in nature. If you are a Christian who belongs to a Masonic lodge, or if you know someone who is, I believe that at the conclusion of our dialogue, you will be enormously enlightened on this subject. Now let's get one thing straight before we begin. No one can fault Masonry for all of its good works, such as their financial contributions to major charities. The Shriners, for example, have a network of burn centers for children throughout the United States that is second to none. However, just because they advocate good works and morals doesn't make them a Christian organization. In fact, as someone has observed, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This organization is, on the other hand, definitely non-Christian. The Bible, for example, is considered to be an indispensable part of the furniture of the Christian lodge, only because it is the sacred book of the Christian religion. The Hebrew Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, are on the altar in a Hebrew lodge and the Quran in a Muslim lodge because of this particular concept of plurality. So let's not call it Christian when it's not.
One of the things that we have to understand is a lot of people fall into cults because a lot of people don't really have a working knowledge of the Bible. But at the same time, it's a problem because all cults use the Bible. This is what makes it so dangerous. This is what makes it so crazy. David Koresh used the Bible. Jim Jones used the Bible. The Mormon Church used the Bible. Conscious Community, 5%ers use the Bible. They don't use it as much, but they use the Bible. Ye are gods. The Bible talks about a devil. You are of your father, the devil. They use the Bible. So we got a lot of folk running around here using the Bible, and this is a problem for us. Now, how much do, as a believer, that's how come Rich says my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. How many people actually know the text and understand the text that they're reading? That's how come we tell people we got to move beyond what just feels good. We got to move to a place of actually knowing what bothers the Father. We got instructions. You think you could just go talk to grandmama? Y'all see this in the Bible, folk just talk to angels? Yeah, I see the people talk to angel. You seen the people talk to angel when angel appeared. Do you see people summoning angels? Y'all are doing something that the book ain't doing. And so many people are out here doing it, and because they see a few passages, a few verses here and there, they think it's okay, and it's actually abomination. It's actually what the Father don't want. How can you know the Father's will? By really knowing the writ. But there's a lot of people that don't really know the writ, so they trust in the charismatic leader. He show you a few verses out the Bible and do a whole bunch of talking. Wait a minute, is this what it's really saying? They read one verse and close up the book. Is this what it's really saying? Let's go up 10 verses. Let's go down 10 verses. Tell me what the book meant. How does that book fit in the New Testament? And then overall, how it fits in the Bible. You asking me stuff, brother, hear the word of the Lord. No. Wait a minute now, because if you don't know that, preacher man, anointed teacher, the one that had a vision, you done been to heaven, walking all up down the streets of gold and all this stuff, spending 2, 3, 4 hours in heaven with Jesus, and you don't know the simple background of this one book right here, you better, I'm scared. Because a whole bunch of folks know this book talking about they ain't going to heaven and all this other stuff and seeing all these beings and doing all of this stuff. You see how them people banging on that guy, Marcus Roger? Talking about the snake and the lady back, and that sounding kundalini-ish, and he's saying, and then I grabbed, and then it's a lot going on right now. You know his doctrine. There's a lot of folk out here, like the other dude hit me in the email I was telling y'all about, Geno Jennings. Now, he Israel. He claiming Israel. He loved Geno Jennings. But you and Geno Jennings, the true man of God. And now, wait a minute, he ain't going with all the doctrine you go with. But a lot of times we'll hear one or two things people believe, and we're riding with them like, you and him ain't the same people. You and him ain't the same people unless you're part of this grabbing anything, a smorgasbord. Because clearly he got videos speaking against what you believe, but you heard some stuff that you like. A lot of people don't know the Bible, and we got to be careful. I'm going to end with that right there. We'll get into the rest of the stuff, but if you know the Bible, I'm going to give you one example before we even get to esoteric, Freemasonry, Royal Arch, and all of that stuff. When we're dealing with the Blue Lodge, when you become entered apprentice, when you first come into lodge, you got to have yourself wrapped up with a cable tow. You got to have one pants leg rolled up. I got to show you LL. Floyd Flake married him, you know, his grandmama, mom, and all of them from the AME church. Prince Hall strong. Prince Hall controlling that AME church. Them Greeks, them Divine Nine, they strong up in there. I ain't got no beef with them. Shout out to the Greeks and the squares. They strong up in there. But he used to be in videos, and then you started seeing some other rappers doing it with a leg up, half of the chest out. And you would have a cable tow, and you would be blindfolded. And then you go to the door, and they would knock on the door. And when they knock on the door, they said that there's a person out here, and this candidate, this person right here, they're in darkness, and they want to come to the light. As you as a Bible believer, especially, I'm not even talking about, I know who I am in the Old Testament. I'm talking about a Bible believer believing on the Messiah that say he's the light of the world. How can you say you need to come to the light and you the preacher? You the bishop, you in darkness, you in spiritual darkness, and you come for Masonic light, and you come and you want to, is that disrespect? That's a fair question. Is it disrespectful for the pastor to get cable towed and to get blindfolded, roll his pants let up, and bang on the door saying he's in search of light, that he needs the light of Masonry? And it's a spiritual light. It's supposed to make men better. It's a spiritual light. So Jesus, is that a spit in the face of Messiah? That's a fair question. Is that a spit in the face? And as we go through the rituals and certain statements that they make, we can clearly see they don't really ride with Ephesians 2:8 and 9. They believe that heaven, what we would call heaven, that the grand architect of the universe, he would take you to heaven, to the celestial lodge above. So writers like Mackey talk about that apron as a badge of righteousness that works. It's some way that works will help you get into the celestial lodge. Is that what Ephesians 2:8 and 9 says? So we got to ask ourselves, do these people know the Bible? Why would you, if you're a pastor and you're preaching every Sunday, if you're a deacon and the Bible says deacons should be apt to teach, so deacons are supposed to know the Bible, do you believe it's about works of righteousness? Not by works of righteousness, or it's works, that good stuff that you do that's going to help you get in there. We're going to look at some Masonic funerals, and we're going to hear the words. They have a chaplain, and most of the time it'd be a preacher or it'd be a deacon. He's the chaplain of the lodge. They open and they close with prayer. Can't say Jesus' name in your prayers. But then we do have some guys that's been affiliated with the AME church, and the lodge, and the whole lodge is AME, and they don't care what the other dudes say, being that the whole lodge is AME. The whole lodge is brothers and deacons and pastors and ministers and people up in the church. The whole lodge, they're going to pray and they're going to break that rule, but you're not supposed to close a prayer in Jesus' name. It's supposed to say, so mote it be. It's so crazy. It's so crazy that Satanists close, witches close their prayers the same way too. So mote it be, the same exact way. It's crazy. It's crazy. We'll talk later. All right. If y'all want to put $1 in the Cash App, $ Berean Teach. Y'all want to send any questions on BereanTeach@gmail.com. We'll pick this up again. Cult Watch Part 4. Hope you enjoyed yourself. God bless.